What is the best card in Magic the Gathering? It's a question just about all of us ask toward the beginning of our time with the game. And the answer we usually get is this. And in a lot of ways, they're right. The Black Lotus has become the one card even non-Magic players recognize, due largely to its financial value. And that value is reflected by its power in-game, providing a one-shot boost of 3 mana of any color without requiring any investment at all. Black Lotus fundamentally ignores all of Magic's conventional balancing for its ability. But what if I told you Black Lotus isn't actually the most powerful card WotC has ever made, albeit in a very, well, actually clickbaity kind of way? While pedantic, Black Lotus isn't the worst offender of the disproportionate cost versus payoff that makes it such a legendary game piece. If you're hip to Power Cube drafts or Commander gameplay, you may be inclined to suggest Sol Ring. And while which of the two is more powerful is a debate in itself, we're not here to talk about either of those today. Although in Cube, Sol Ring is definitely the first pick. So alongside mana acceleration, card draw is one of the most valuable resources in the game. Cards like Ancestral Recall make a good poster child for this, trading 3 cards for 1 mana, making it one of the most efficient examples the game has to offer throughout its nearly 30-year life. However, we can do better. For a price at least. Not a monetary cost like the aforementioned Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall, but rather the cost of added risk. Enter Contract from Below. If you're new to the game, there's a good chance you've never heard of this card at all, and to be fair, that makes a lot of sense considering it's banned in every format, including Vintage, where cards like the Power 9 are usually played, albeit restricted to 1 copy per deck. So it's banned in a format where Black Lotus, the Moxen, and Ancestral Recall are all legal. What does this thing do? So Contract from Below is a 1-mana black sorcery that reads, discard your hand, then draw 8 cards, adding the first card drawn this way to the ante. Remove this card from your deck if you aren't playing for ante. Hold on, ante? Yes, so again, if you're fairly new to the game, the second half of that card might not make a lot of sense, and it's a big part of, if not the entire reason this card is banned literally everywhere. In the first few sets of the game's life from the mid-90s, there were a handful of cards printed that mentioned ante in this way. Back in the early days, players would often play for keeps, starting the game with a random card from their deck set aside as part of an ante, where the winner of the game would keep their own ante card as well as get to keep their opponent's. With this dynamic of the game came cards that caused players to add extra cards to the ante in exchange for their in-game effects. Contract from Below being probably the most notable and undoubtedly the most powerful of these cards. The reward is undoubtedly the single biggest payoff you can get in the game for 1 mana without a significant setup relying on other cards. The risk is the possibility of losing not 1 but 2 cards from your deck. So yeah, I dump my hand early and refill for close to free, but there's a non-zero chance that a card like Mox Jet gets added to the ante and I'm out a couple $1,000s. These days, playing for ante is obviously against the official tournament rules, and for good reason, as anything remotely resembling gambling in a children's card game probably isn't the best look. Plus, I think most players enjoy keeping their decks intact after matches. So back to Contract from Below. Ante aside, let's take a look at the mechanics here. At its core, Contract is a one-sided Wheel of Fortune at 1/3 the cost, which for the uninitiated is a card that is already on its own restricted in Vintage. So in a formatless vacuum, Contract is the single best Magic card ever printed. It's the perfect high risk, high reward card and the biggest single payoff for 1 mana the game will ever offer. So aside from being just a corner case oddity from a time where the game looked pretty different than it does today, this card doesn't really have a home or purpose, which is why you can pick up copies for around $2 despite it being part of the reserved list. Which again, for the uninitiated means it's never going to be reprinted again, and the only copies were the ones originally printed in the mid-90s. So despite that, it still maintains a very affordable price tag. And while it's unfortunate you'll never be able to cast this in Vintage, it does make it a super accessible card to add to a cube. When I draft this in Cube, it is 100% of the time my first pick if I open it. Not Black Lotus, not Sol Ring, not Library, not Sovereign's Realm, I guess is good. This. This is the single best card the game has to offer. The detriment of adding a card to the ante is also significantly less stressful in a format where you already walk away from the game without any of the cards in your deck, unless you own the cube. But that's all I have to say about Contract from Below. Thanks so much if you made it to the end of this video. I just think this card is so unique and wanted to talk about it. I know my upload schedule is trash, but I do plan on changing that very soon. I appreciate you guys. Stay safe, take care of each other. Until next time.